I'm Mia, and I want to tell you a tale. I was around 6 or 7 years old when it all started. At that point, my parents divorced. Harold, my father, was no longer able to cope. For years, my mother, Isabella, had been pursuing him, constantly reminding him that he wasn't earning enough money. She repeatedly denigrated him and made him feel unworthy. One day, I recall my dad coming home ecstatic about getting promoted at work. For once, he was pleased with himself, and his smile was the widest. However, Mom just glanced at him and remarked, "That's it. I believed you had at last secured a legitimate job." I saw the happiness leave his face. It resembled the gradual deflation of a balloon. Dad departed shortly after that. I can see why now that I'm older, but at the time, it seemed like everything was falling apart. Mom regarded his departure as an opportunity. She soon saw how she might take advantage of the poor single mother narrative. When she went to work, she would pretend to be depressed in front of her employer. She would wipe phony tears and say, "I'm so sorry I'm late again, Mr. Frank. I didn't have anyone to help when Mia got sick." While Mom spent hours on her hair and cosmetics, I was content to stay at home and watch cartoons. Mr. Frank would stroke her hand and reassure her that she shouldn't worry. The worst events were family get-togethers. When Dad abandoned us and left us with nothing, Mom would take center stage and tell everyone about it in dramatic fashion. Even though I knew that wasn't true, I would writhe in my chair and never dare to speak. I knew better than to bring Mom into disrepute in public, even at that age. Dad was sending money every month, but no one knew. What he termed it was child support. "Look at this, Mia," Mom would remark, waving those checks in my face whenever they arrived. "According to your father, this meager sum is sufficient to rear a child." Horrible. I simply knew that it infuriated her. I had no idea how much it was supposed to be, and my life became much more difficult when Mom was upset. I started to notice things as I grew older, such as Mom's occasional gaze on me. When she saw anything that she didn't like, her eyes would narrow. I later understood that it was because I resembled Dad too much, and those were not joyful memories for her. Nevertheless, she kept me around. You see, I was beneficial. It was impossible to ignore the picture of the suffering single mother with her courageous little daughter. She received pity, preferential treatment, and even some government assistance as a result. Then things changed once again when I was around 10 years old. Mom met Jack, a successful and wealthy man. All of a sudden, being a struggling single mother was no longer so desirable. She now had a new character to play, that of the loyal spouse of a prosperous businessman. Furthermore, I no longer fit that image. It began modestly. I never had anything clean to wear to school because Mom would forget to wash my clothing. I would arrive in rumpled, discolored clothing, feeling ashamed as the other children pointed and murmured. Then there was the matter of the food. When Mom prepared elaborate meals for her and Jack, the home would smell of delectable food. However, when I arrived at the table, she would exclaim, "Oh, Mia, I apologize. For 3, I didn't create enough. Why don't you prepare a sandwich for yourself?" With my tummy rumbling, I would head to the kitchen and prepare a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. In the dining room, I could hear Mom and Jack giggling, and the sound of wine glasses clinking made my meager dinner seem even more insignificant. When Mother began interfering with my schooling, it was the worst. I would labor on a project for hours on end, only to have it disappear the following morning. I would arrive at school with nothing and find it difficult to explain the situation to the instructor. My professors began to look at me with concern as my grades began to decline. Jack didn't appear to notice any of this. He was constantly preoccupied with his job, and when he was at home, he focused entirely on Mom. She did a fantastic job portraying the devoted wife. She would stroke his shoulders and say, "Jack, darling, you work so hard. You ought to take a vacation." He would smile as he gazed up at her, completely enthralled. He would ask, "Isabella, what would I do without you?" When Mom revealed she was pregnant, things became worse. Mom took full advantage of Jack's excitement. She would lie on the couch and tell me, "The doctor says I need lots of rest. Will you be kind and clean the house?" While Mom napped or talked on the phone with friends, I spent my days cleaning. She would gently get up and cradle her hardly noticeable baby bulge when Jack got home. She would remark, "Oh, honey, I'm so tired." Having a baby requires a lot of work. "Sit down, my love," Jack would remark in a frightened hurry. "Bring your mom some water, Mia." As the months went by, I felt more and more alone. I started pulling away from my friends at school, too ashamed to invite them over to my house. At home, I felt like a stranger. I was more like a servant, expected to do whatever Mom wanted. One night, I was in bed, listening to Mom and Jack excitedly talking about nursery designs, and something inside me snapped. I couldn't handle it anymore. I needed to get out. With shaky hands, I picked up my phone and did something I had never dared to do before. I called my dad and told him everything. The neglect, the mind games, the constant feeling of being unwanted. Dad listened quietly, the only sound being his breathing, letting me know he was still there. When I finally stopped talking, there was a long silence. Then he said, "Pack your bags. I'm coming to get you." His voice was firm and serious. The next morning, I got up early, my heart beating fast with a mix of excitement and fear. I had already packed my bags the night before, too anxious to sleep. As I dragged my suitcase down the stairs, I heard Mom's voice coming from the kitchen. "Going somewhere, Maya?" she asked. I froze, expecting a big fight. But when I turned around, I saw her leaning against the doorway with a strange smile on her face. She actually looked relieved. "I'm going to live with Dad," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. To my surprise, Mom's smile grew even wider. "Well, it's about time," she said, almost cheerful. "Jack and I could use the extra space for the baby." Her words hit me hard, like a slap in the face. Before I could say anything, I heard a car horn outside. Dad was here. Mom walked me to the door, that unsettling smile still on her face. "Have a good life, Mia," she said, almost pushing me out the door. As I walked to Dad's car, I glanced back. Mom was standing in the doorway, actually happy, waving goodbye. It was the happiest I'd seen her in years, and it was because I was leaving. Dad's apartment was small, but it felt more like home than any place I'd lived in a long time. We didn't stay there for long, though. Over the next few months, I watched in amazement as Dad's business took off. It seemed like every week he had good news. A new contract, a big client, or plans to expand. Within a year, we were looking at houses in the best neighborhoods in the city. The house we bought was incredible. 2 stories of modern design with huge windows, and a backyard that looked like something out of a magazine. My room was bigger than our entire old apartment. Dad worked long hours managing his now successful business, and I put my energy into turning our big house into a real home. I learned to cook fancy meals, filling the house with delicious smells. I kept everything clean, managed the staff, and even started a vegetable garden in the big backyard. As the months went by, everything began to change. I watched as Dad's hard work kept paying off. His business kept growing, and our life got even better. I transferred to the best private school in the city, and on my 18th birthday, Dad gave me a huge surprise. A brand new luxury SUV. "Now you can drive yourself to school in style," he said with a smile, tossing me the keys, and maybe run some errands for your old man. As I got used to my new life, I thought about Mom less and less. She never reached out to me, and I didn't try to contact her or any of my relatives on her side. The hurt was still too fresh, and the memories were too painful. Instead, I focused on my studies. Years passed, and before I knew it, I was graduating from college with honors. As I stood on the stage holding my diploma, I looked out into the crowd for Dad. He was there, smiling with pride, and for a moment, I forgot to breathe. This was what it felt like to be truly loved. After the ceremony, Dad pulled me aside with a grin. "I have something for you," he said, his eyes shining. He handed me a small box. Inside was a key. "It's for your new apartment in the city center. Consider it a graduation gift." Tears filled my eyes as I hugged him tightly. "Thank you, Dad, for everything." A few years went by after I graduated from college. My career was going well. I had a beautiful apartment in the city, and life was good. Dad and I had settled into a comfortable routine, weekly dinners and long phone calls. Everything seemed perfect until it wasn't. The news hit like a lightning bolt on a sunny day. Dad was sick. Cancer. Advanced. The doctor's words blurred into a mix of medical terms, but the main point was clear. It was serious. From that moment on, my world became all about saving Dad. I took a break from work and moved back into his house to take care of him. Every moment of my day was focused on his care. I researched treatments, talked to specialists, and even looked into alternative therapies, anything that might give us a chance. The following months were a tough mix of hope and despair. For every good day when Dad felt well enough to sit outside or enjoy a meal, there were 3 bad ones, full of pain and sickness from the treatments. One evening, after a particularly hard day, I was helping him back to bed. He turned to me with a serious expression. "Mia," he said softly, his voice just above a whisper, "I need you to promise me something." I nodded, unable to speak because of the lump in my throat. "Promise me you'll live your life," Dad said. "Really live it. Don't let this hold you back." I wanted to argue, to tell him he was going to be fine, but we both knew that that wasn't true. So instead, I squeezed his hand and said, "I promise, Dad." He passed away 3 weeks later. I was holding his hand when he took his last breath, telling him how much I loved him and how grateful I was for everything he had done for me. The next few days were a blur. I felt numb as I went through the motions of arranging the funeral. There were so many things to take care of: the casket, the flowers, the obituary. It all felt unreal, like I was planning something for someone else. I was at the funeral home trying to choose music for the service when my phone buzzed. The call was from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Hello. Mia, it's your mother." I nearly dropped the phone. After all these years of silence, she was calling now. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice cold. "I heard about Harold," she said, her voice softer than I remembered. "I'm so sorry, sweetie. I'd like to help with the funeral arrangements." I wanted to hang up, to tell her to leave me alone, but I was so tired, so overwhelmed, and a small part of me, a part I thought I had buried long ago, longed for a mother's comfort. "Okay," I heard myself say. "You can help." As I ended the call, I had a nagging feeling that I had just opened a door I should have kept closed. But with Dad gone, Mom was the only family I had left. Mom showed up at the funeral home an hour after the call, with my half-brother Brian. He was about 15 now, tall and awkward. I watched as Mom fussed over him, straightening his tie and smoothing his hair. It hurt seeing her shower Brian with the care and attention I had never received. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Despite my hesitation, I gave her tasks to handle. To my surprise, Mom was actually helpful. She managed the catering, arranged the flowers, and dealt with a constant flow of people offering their condolences. The funeral itself went by in a haze. I remember standing there, numb, as people I barely knew came up to offer their sympathy. Mom stayed close, her hand sometimes touching my arm, as if to comfort me. It felt strange to have her there, acting like a mother after so many years of neglect. After the service, when people were leaving the cemetery, Mom came up to me again. "Mia," she said, "I know this might not be the right time, but I'd like to stay in touch. Maybe we could get coffee sometime." I stared at her, this woman who had made my childhood so difficult, who had been happy to see me leave. But now she was the only family I had left. "Maybe," I said at last. "I'll think about it." To my surprise, Isabella actually kept her word. In the weeks that followed, she called me often, her voice always full of concern. "How are you doing, sweetie?" she'd ask. "Do you need anything?" At first, I was distant, giving short answers, not trusting her. But as the days went by and I started feeling the weight of Dad's absence, I found myself wanting some kind of connection, even if it was with Isabella. Our conversations started simple. She asked about my job, my apartment, my friends. But over time, her questions began to shift. "Your father's business," she'd mention casually. "I hope it's not too much for you. Harold always worked so hard." I would quickly change the subject. The truth was, I was overwhelmed. Dad had left me everything. The company, the real estate. It was a lot to handle. And deep down, some part of me, sharpened by years of dealing with Isabella, told me to stay quiet about it. As the weeks turned into months, Isabella's hints became less subtle. "Brian is looking at colleges," she said during one call. "Tuition is so expensive these days. I don't know how we'll manage." I made a non-committal sound, my guard instantly up. Another time, she said, Jack had some setbacks at work. "The economy is hitting everyone hard." It seemed like every conversation turned into a talk about money and their struggles, and each time I felt the pressure in her words. Despite my doubts, Isabella's sudden acts of kindness began to break down my defenses. Against my better judgment, I started to help out with small amounts of money. It started innocently, paying for Brian's SAT prep classes, buying Isabella a new laptop when hers broke, even covering a month's rent when Jack's company hit a rough patch. "You're an angel, Maya," Isabella would say. "I don't know what we'd do without you." Each time she said it, I felt a warmth inside me. Was this what it was like to have a real family? Meanwhile, I threw myself into running Dad's company. I promoted his trusted deputy to director while I remained the owner, making all the big decisions. It was hard work, but sitting in Dad's old office made me feel closer to him. As time went on, Isabella's requests became more frequent and bigger. What started as occasional help turned into regular expectations. The breaking point came one sunny Sunday afternoon. I was knee-deep in quarterly reports when Isabella called. "Mia, darling," she began, her voice overly sweet. "We've been thinking. It's been so long since we had a proper family vacation. We found this amazing package deal for a European tour." My stomach dropped. "Isabella, I don't know," I started to say. "It would mean so much to Brian." She cut me off. "After all we've been through, don't you think we deserve a little happiness?" I felt guilt mixed with anger in my chest, and before I knew it, I had agreed to pay for their trip. But it didn't end there. The day after they got back, Isabella was on the phone again. "Now about Brian's college fund," she said, her tone this time demanding rather than sweet. "We'll need you to set that up right away. He's got his heart set on Boardtown, you know." Something inside me snapped. All the years of neglect, the emotional games, the manipulation, they all came crashing back. "No," I said, my voice shaking. "No more, Mom. I'm done." There was a pause. Then Isabella's voice turned cold. "After everything we've done for you, you ungrateful brat. How dare you turn your back on your family?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Family? You mean the mother who was happy to see me go, the one who made my childhood miserable." The argument exploded. Isabella dropped any pretense of kindness, throwing insults and accusations. I fought back, years of anger and pain spilling out. "You're just like your father," she spat. "Selfish and cold-hearted." Thank God for that, I shot back. At least he loved me. The line went dead. I stood there shaking, the phone clutched in my hand, the silence overwhelming. When a chance for a month-long business trip abroad came up, I grabbed it. It was the perfect escape, a chance to get away and clear my head. As I boarded the plane, I felt a huge weight lift from my shoulders. Maybe some time and distance was exactly what I needed. After a month away, I was eager to get back to my own space. The trip had been successful but exhausting, and I couldn't wait to relax in my apartment. But when I turned the key in the lock, something felt wrong. I pushed the door open, and my heart sank. Everything was different. My carefully chosen furniture was gone, replaced by decorations I didn't recognize. A shocked couple stared at me from the couch. "Who are you?" I demanded, panic rising. "What are you doing in my apartment?" The man stood up, looking confused. "Your apartment. We bought this place a couple of weeks ago from a woman named Isabella." The world spun around me. Isabella, my mother. No, it couldn't be. There had to be some mistake. I stood there, my voice shaking. "I never sold this apartment. I've been out of the country." The couple looked at each other, clearly worried. "We have all the paperwork," the woman said, sounding unsure. "Maybe you should talk to your realtor." I stumbled out of the apartment, my mind spinning. My first thought was to call the police and report fraud, but something inside told me to confront Mom first. I needed to hear it from her own mouth. With trembling fingers, I dialed her number. It rang once, twice. "Hello, Mia." Mom's voice was overly sweet. "How was your trip?" "Cut the nonsense, Mom," I snapped. "What did you do to my apartment?" There was a long pause, and then, to my shock, Isabella laughed, a cold, mocking laugh. "Oh, Mia," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "If you had just shared your money willingly, it wouldn't have come to this. You did this to yourself, you know." It felt like a punch in the stomach. You sold my apartment? How could you?" "I'm going to the police." "Oh, really?" Isabella interrupted, her voice suddenly hard. "You're going to report your own mother. Please, we both know you don't have the guts for that." The call ended abruptly, leaving me standing on the sidewalk, homeless and in shock. But her smug confidence lit a fire in me. Without thinking, I hailed a cab and told the driver to take me to Isabella and Jack's house. I pounded on the door, anger and adrenaline racing through me. Jack answered, looking confused. "Mia, what's going on?" I pushed past him into the house. "Where's Isabella?" I demanded. "She's not here," he said, looking even more bewildered. "Mia, what is this about?" In a rush, I told him everything. The apartment, Isabella's confession, all of it. As I spoke, I saw the color drain from Jack's face. "That's impossible," he said, stunned. "We don't need money for Brian's education. I've already set aside funds for that." We stared at each other, the truth slowly sinking in. With shaky hands, Jack started pulling out financial statements and credit card bills. As we went through them, the full story came out. Mom had secretly taken out loans and was drowning in debt. I had no idea, Jack whispered, looking shocked. I felt a strange mix of anger and pity. Jack had been just as deceived as I was. As the full extent of Isabella's lies came to light, a cold determination settled over me. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was outright fraud. I knew what I had to do, and I didn't hesitate. I hung up with a 111 operator, feeling like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For too long, I had been Mom's victim, but not anymore. The ensuing inquiry was difficult, but it was necessary. More of Isabella's falsehoods were revealed with each new revelation. She had been leading a second life, not only forging my signature to sell my flat. The credit card bills displayed expensive clothing, upscale spa treatments, and stays at 7-star hotels, all of which were concealed from Jack and funded by a network of deceit and covert loans. Reporters flocked outside the courthouse in search of any tidbit of information as the trial descended into a media frenzy. A part of me was relieved to watch Isabella's flawless image crumble in front of everyone, even if I detested being in the limelight. Justice was done in the end. Mom was convicted of forgery, fraud, and other offenses. Mrs. Isabella Sermon, your actions show a complete disregard for the law and a betrayal of your family's trust, the judge said, and I can still clearly remember it. I give you a 4-year prison term and mandate that you reimburse Mia Sermon for the whole cost of the apartment. Jack was stunned the entire time. He phoned me the day following the sentencing. Mia, he began in a trembling voice, I'm requesting full custody of Brian as part of my divorce proceedings. I can't allow her to be around him after what she did. I then began the process of restoring my life. I got my money back from the apartment and used it to start again by purchasing a modest home on the outskirts of the city. I worked hard to manage Dad's business and try my best to carry on his legacy. Although the job was difficult, it felt fantastic, and I felt like I was truly on my own for the first time. I keep in contact with Brian. Now that he's in college, Jack is fully behind him as he studies engineering. I'm glad we have some kind of relationship, even though it's a bittersweet one. Since the trial, Isabella has not gotten back to me. I have no idea if she has made an effort to get in touch, and to be honest, I don't want to know. I've moved on from that phase of my life.